It was Thanksgiving Day 2019, and Emma Martinez was sitting at the dinner table in her parents' house in Portland, Oregon. Around her, 19 extended family members filled their plates with turkey, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce. Conversation flowed between politics, football, and family gossip, until her Aunt Patricia, holding her second glass of wine, asked the question Emma had been avoiding for 3 years. "So, Emma, have you and Ryan thought about giving your mother a grandchild yet? You're already 32, honey." The clock is ticking. The table went silent. 18 pairs of eyes turned to Emma. She felt the familiar weight in her chest, tension climbing up her neck. She placed her fork on her plate carefully, took a deep breath, and said the words she had mentally rehearsed hundreds of times. "Aunt Pat, Ryan, and I have decided we're not having children. Ever. It's a choice we made together, and we're completely at peace with it." What happened in the next 45 minutes would fundamentally change how Emma saw herself and her place in society, not because her family disowned her or threw her out, but because of the 19 people in that room. Only 2, her cousin Alex and her 83-year-old grandmother, didn't try to convince her she was wrong, confused, or going through a phase. "You'll regret it," her mother whispered, eyes welling up. "Who's going to take care of you when you're old?" her father asked, genuinely worried. "You're being selfish," her cousin Jennifer declared, while her 3 children ran screaming through the room. "You just haven't met the right man yet," Aunt Patricia insisted. "Wait until your hormones kick in at 35. Emma wasn't confused. She wasn't going through a phase. She wasn't waiting for the right man or the right moment. She simply, fundamentally, did not want to be a mother. And that absolute certainty, that unshakable clarity about a choice so contrary to social expectations, hides a fascinating psychology that most people never understand. This is the real story of why some people choose not to have children, what science reveals about these choices, and why our society reacts with such hostility to a decision that should be perfectly neutral. Before we dive deep into applied psychology, subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're from. Emma Martinez always knew. It wasn't a sudden epiphany at 25 or 30. It was a consistent absence of something everyone said she should feel. When she was 14 and her friends started babysitting to earn money, Emma chose to work at a bookstore. When she was 20, 2 and her college roommates sighed over cute babies in strollers. Emma looked and felt nothing. Not repulsion, not desire. Just neutral indifference. "People always assumed something was wrong with me," Emma told me in an interview 2 years after that Thanksgiving. "Like my brain's wiring was defective. But I didn't feel broken, I felt clear." And here's what neuroscience reveals. Emma was right. Nothing was broken. Her brain simply wasn't producing the response that society programs people to expect. When most women see babies, a specific brain region called the ventral tegmental area lights up. This is the same region activated by rewards, romantic love, and addiction. It releases dopamine, creating a feeling of pleasure and desire. Functional MRI studies show this response is particularly strong in women of childbearing age, especially those who express a desire to have children. But in people who identify as child-free, the technical term for those who consciously choose not to have children, this activation is significantly reduced or absent, not because there's something wrong with them, but because parental desire isn't universal or biological in the way we're told it is. Dr. Amy Blackstone, sociologist at the University of Maine who spent 15 years studying child-free people, explains, "We've been conditioned to believe that maternal instinct is universal, biologically hardwired, inevitable. But the evidence simply doesn't support that. What we see is enormous variation in how different brains respond to child-related stimuli, and that variation is completely normal." Emma wasn't fighting against an instinct. She simply didn't have that specific instinct, and that freed her to make a choice based on who she really was, not on who society insisted she should be. Emma's family's reaction wasn't unique. It was statistically predictable. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Marriage and Family analyzed social attitudes toward child-free people in 37 countries. The results were striking in their consistency. Across all cultures studied, people who choose not to have children, particularly women, face what researchers call a deviance penalty. They're seen as less fulfilled, less warm, less trustworthy, and less morally complete than people with children. And this doesn't just come from strangers. It comes from family, friends, coworkers, even medical professionals. Emma experienced this repeatedly. At 28, she asked her gynecologist about tubal ligation. "You're too young to make that decision," he said, refusing. "What if you change your mind? What if your future husband wants children?" When Emma explained that she and Ryan had already discussed this extensively, the doctor shook his head. "Give it a few more years. You'll feel differently." She didn't. At 30, with a new doctor, she tried again. Same response. Only at 34, after 3 different doctors, did Emma finally find someone who respected her bodily autonomy enough to perform the procedure. What was happening here wasn't legitimate medical concern. It was deeply entrenched cultural bias, the belief that women can't really know their own minds about motherhood, that the desire to have children is so fundamental to female identity that its absence must be pathological, temporary, or denied. Psychologists identify this as gender essentialism, the belief that certain characteristics are inherent and immutable to each gender. For women, one of those presumed characteristics is maternal desire. When a woman violates that expectation, she's not just making a personal choice, she's challenging a fundamental social construction, and society punishes such challenges, not always through obvious ostracism, but through 1,000 small cuts. The automatic assumption at family gatherings that you don't have kids yet, not that you chose not to have them. The exclusion from parent conversations that dominate social gatherings. The presumption at work that you can stay late because you don't have a family to go home to. The look of pity or confusion when you explain your choice. Emma learned to navigate these microaggressions, but each one cost emotional energy. Energy that people with children never had to spend defending their reproductive choices. But here's what Emma also discovered. On the other side of social pressure was something rare and valuable: authentic freedom. 5 years after that Thanksgiving, Emma and Ryan live in a modern apartment in Seattle. She's a creative director at an advertising agency. Ryan is a music teacher. They travel 4 times a year: Japan, Iceland, Peru, places they'd always dreamed of seeing. Their weekends are filled with hiking, live concerts, art projects, long. "People always ask if I feel empty," Emma said, as if the absence of children automatically creates an existential void. "But my life doesn't feel empty, it feels complete. Just complete in ways different from what society programs people to value." Research supports this. A 2019 longitudinal study followed 5,000 child-free people for 20 years. Contrary to popular wisdom, the study found that child-free people don't report higher levels of regret in later ages compared to parents. In fact, on several metrics, relationship satisfaction, mental health, financial stability, child-free people scored comparable or higher. The myth that everyone who chooses not to have children eventually regrets it, statistically false. Studies show only 8% of child-free people report significant regret. Compare that to studies on parental regret, which suggests 4% of parents, if they could do it again, would choose not to have children. Nobody talks about parental regret. It's one of the last cultural taboos, but child-free people are constantly warned about future regret, as if their choices are inherently more risky, more prone to error. Emma confronted this fear directly. "What if I regret it?" she asked herself repeatedly in her mid-20s, and then realized, what if parents regret it? Both are possible, but only one, the regret of not having children, is treated as existential catastrophe, while the other remains too unthinkable to acknowledge. So she changed the question. Not, "What if I regret it?" but "What do I actually want for my life?" And the answer was clear. It always had been. Today, Emma is part of a growing trend. In 2203, approximately 25% of American women reaching their 40s don't have children, the highest number ever recorded. Some due to infertility or circumstance, but a growing percentage, like Emma, by deliberate and celebrated choice. They're not selfish, they're not broken, they're not running from responsibility. They're simply making authentic choices about their own lives, refusing social scripts that never fit, and creating meaning in ways their parents' generation can't always understand. And maybe, just maybe, their visible existence is making it easier for the next generation to make honest choices without shame, without social punishment, without having to defend ad nauseum a decision that should be as personal and unquestionable as any other about one's own body and future. The psychology of people who don't want to have children isn't complex or pathological. It's simply this: they know themselves. They know what they want, and they have the courage to live authentically even when everyone around them insists they're wrong. That's not a flaw, it's a strength. And that's the end of our experience. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. It's very important for us to know the truth. Be honest in the comments, leaving creative suggestions so we can improve the quality of our content more and more. Comment where you're from. Check out the video on the screen. I'm sure you'll like it. See you in a few seconds. We are Applied Psychology, and this is our contribution. Subscribe.